Welcome back to the Restaurant Growth Show podcast. Joining us today is David Dittenber, a seasoned entrepreneur with over 25 years in the restaurant industry. David introduces us to his latest venture, BYOD, an advanced operational management platform that has been recognized as the top food service management solutions provider in 2023 by Food and Beverage Technology Review. Through its innovative virtual restaurant assistant, Mabel, BYOD leverages deep learning technology to offer real-time predictive data, revolutionizing decision-making for restaurateurs. David, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Gordon. Thanks for having me today.
You know what? I've addressed you both as Dave and David. Do you have a preference of the two?
You know what? I tell my mom I answer to anything. So I go by David. Dave, my mom is the one who usually, and family members call me David. So I answer to either, but Dave is fine. Thanks
That,
for asking.
that's great. Absolutely. You know what? I'm the same. People ask me, do you go by Gord or Gordon or Gordy? You know what? I answer to all of the above. So I don't have a preference either. Listen, Dave, before we jump into our questions, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself and the journey that led you to create BYOD?
Yeah, and it's probably not the typical technology journey. I'm an operator by trade. I've been, part of operations since I was a dishwasher in a small town in northern Michigan. So I've always looked at it through that lens. Started on the independent side, went to work for Enterprise, then came back and owned my own group here starting in 90 after I graduated from college. Went to college to go to med school and then went back into hospitality. So, my parents were like, yeah, that was a complete waste of time that we that we supported that. But always have been, kind of like I said, looking at it from the operational lens. So, I remember back in that first enterprise job I had with Outback Steakhouse, point of sale technology was just becoming a new thing, and so I've seen kind of those technological advances from when things first started to go digital, to every piece of paper and, placemat that have flipped over backwards to write things like schedules and whatever on. So as I kind of advanced through my own kind of restaurant technology stack, if you will, when we first started, our technology stack was calculators and pencils and paper. So we've come a long way. But, I've always tried to be an early adopter in technology. But as I did that, what we found that we saw was we had at one point 17 different platforms of IoT. And as things started to become more app-based and mobile and cloud-based, my restaurant managers were all just sitting in a back office, and instead of taking care of customers or training our staff to make a better experience, they looked like they were off the set of Minority Report with 27 screens around them, right? And none of those pieces of technology spoke to one another. So the idea was, could we take all those pieces of technology and put them into a single repository, right? And again, I wasn't like I was versed in things like machine learning and artificial intelligence. I had to put smart people around me to be able to say, can we connect those dots? And the idea was, can we give that information to the people that need it and the time they need it versus sitting at a P&L meeting 6 weeks later, right? So it was always about interventional decisions we could make now, that improve the guest and the employee experience. And so BYOD and eventually Mabel was born. BYOD is kind of that agnostic middle that brings all the information in, and then Mabel's that person that sits there that is sorting through all that information, that can sort it faster than we can, that can connect those dots and be able to get the information to the right people at the right time.
That's incredible. That's quite the story. I'm gonna admit our co-host here because he's late to the party.
And you see a restaurant guy, that's the normal thing, right?
Exactly. It's a just-in-time scenario. In this case, not in time. So, yeah, okay. Jose is here.
So sorry, it was a little bit of a nightmare right now. It was really strange. I was there, then I wasn't, it was really strange. Anyway, pleasure meeting you, David.
Nice to meet you too, Jose.
This is the beauty of the podcast world. You never know who's going to show up or if they're going to show up. You know what I mean? So that's great. Dave, we'll just jump in here. That was a really great introduction. Let's jump into the questions. and Jose can acclimate himself as he sees. So Dave, we've established that it's Dave.
Okay.
It's all right, folks. We said we established we answered anything, so it's good.
That's right. I answered, hey, you is how I'm doing it. Dave, your experience spans various industries from restaurants to tech. Could you share how integrating technology with traditional business models have reshaped your approach to entrepreneurship?
Yeah, sure. I think, again, just kind of looking at the evolution of technology, it's there's no shortage of data or information, that's for sure. But how do we put that into practice? And so I think whether it be, you can have the greatest platform, but if it doesn't translate into something that's going to give whoever your end user is the better experience. And I don't think it matters what industry, and whether you're building or restaurants, or it doesn't really matter, right? So I've always tried to be, like I said, very on the front edge of early adoption of technology. You also have to realize that doesn't necessarily get you to the end point you need to, right? I think it's a people process technology three-way street. And I think so many people, immediately try to say, hey, technology is going to solve that issue. And yet they don't look at how they're going to implement. So, our approach is always, kind of that keep it simple, stupid example, to be, how can we, effectively communicate at whatever the level is, that technology, people, and process message, and then just continue to be able to train and replicate or change that process if it's necessary, right? If you bring something new. So I know that's kind of a basic answer, but to me, it's, if you don't have people, process, technology, it's just, you're going to be, one hand's going to be fighting another one, and always struggling to figure out that interpretation of how it gets done.
No, that makes perfect sense. I mean, listen, the restaurant industry is going through so many changes, and you're right. It's common for someone to say, oh, well, let's just develop some technology to solve that problem. But there are so many touch points, there are so many moving parts, and operations is so fluid. There needs to be quite literally integrated into the entire process. And just saying, oh, we've got technology that's going to solve that, it just isn't the case. Or a case where something's been developed and that's the end all be all. We still need to stay high level with these solutions that we're building for restaurants. And every single day we're learning something new. And anyone who tells me that they've got an end-to-end solution, especially for the restaurant industry, is lying through their teeth. And I don't believe them at all. So I appreciate where the perspective you're coming from. Dave, with BYOD's introduction of Mabel, the virtual restaurant assistant, how do you see AI continuing to transform the daily operations of restaurants?
I've always, and I think you brought up some really good points in your response, and always, I first would hear things like AI and machine learning, it's like this blanket that's going to solve every problem, or to your point, it's already been implemented in it. And we really took the kind of the opposite approach. Like, I think of AI like augmented intelligence. I think in order to have hospitality or anything in a personal touch, I think you need to use the technology in a way that helps the person that is making that decision easier for them, right? So I like to augment behavior and help people to do that in a way that isn't, artificial, right? So I know that's maybe not the best commercial for an AI to say it's trying to be a little bit less AI, but for me, I think, to your point, it's all about the use case, that you can use the technology to get a good result, versus technology pushed down on something that doesn't really know all the different moving pieces or the workflow. And to your point, in restaurants, I'm sure there are places where you could easily automate. BYOD and Mabel was all about, not the 99% of the decisions that you don't need to make, but it's about the 1% that you need to make in order to make that difference. And I feel like that was a really responsible use of technology, versus just coming out and saying we can solve everything for everybody. And we've had to scrap a lot of things, from the beginning development in order to get to that endpoint. But as operators, you don't want something else that's going to be promised to you that under delivers, that doesn't solve the problem. So to me, I think it's about those use cases that are really needed instead of a blanket that's just a technology that's going to fix it, right? So I think that's been the approach. And, you can always advance it once the industry, whatever it is ready for it. But to your point, I don't think we're all the way there yet. And that's not a bad thing, right? I mean, I think that's exactly how we should evolve when it comes to the technology adoption spectrum.
I really like that approach, the 1% of something that needs to be that repetitive task. And let's solve that first instead of just a whole bunch of software and hardware at a whole bunch of different problems and seeing if we can make it work. That's kind of what we're doing at Dine Pricing, is we're really specializing. We're really focusing on solving this one problem and getting extremely good at that. And then from there, we're going to expand and look at other features and look at other problems that we can solve with our technology. But I really think that's the approach, especially in this industry that's just so complicated, so fluid, and is immensely customer facing. Let's face it. Jose?
So no, I'm just gonna add that it's also very, very unique. Like every situation, every moment is, and every operation is so distinct that it's really hard to achieve the all-in-one or the full solution, or it's for every with the one single thing, right? So I agree with that. But so on that note, Dave, what do you think is the single most impactful piece of technology that every restaurant should adopt today?
I don't see it as much as I did maybe even when we first started this, Jose, but obviously cloud-based point of sale is the number one thing. And again, there's a lot of reasons for that we all went to, and I think we talked about it a little bit with that adoption of technology. A lot of people adopted to cloud-based more for flexibility and handhelds, or the ability to integrate with loyalty or the third-party deliveries and stuff like that. So, which I agree with. But I think one of the things where, we always say data without insight is meaningless, right? So I think the fact from a cloud-based point of sale is that if you're able to take what I think is the single most, I guess, impactful piece of technology that I've seen in my years in the restaurant, it's a point of sale where you can actually use that data to be able to make better decisions, right? And so I think if anybody does that, they need to look at the data and insight capabilities that come along with the easy integration. And, I love all the customer pieces and all that. And I think a lot of that happened because, during pandemic, everybody was forced to adapt to that kind of stuff. But I'll tell you, it's still crazy to me how many people don't want to, they're using the same micros that I was using in 1997.
Right. Yeah, no, huge.
So I think that's the biggest one, Jose.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I think that, I mean, the restaurant industry has been revolving around the POS, but the beauty about cloud POS is that everybody meets in the cloud. Other pieces of technology, all the data centralized and integration it's definitely, I can see it.
Yeah, just building on your point, Dave, we had a recurring guest, Matt Plapp, on the show last week, and we talked about what's the newest technology, what should operators be adopting, and what's the latest and greatest, all that kind of stuff. And he said, what, there's a lot of bells and whistles, there's this and there's that, but honestly, operators need to be taking advantage of the tried and true, the technologies. And he was speaking in MarTech and marketing technology, and he's like, Facebook ads work, Google ads work, get on social media,
use video.
Exactly, use the technology that works first before you get all of the bells and whistles and all the latest flash in the pan technology, right?
100%. And that it's funny how when you lose focus of what I'm a big sports guy, and growing up playing sports, the fundamentals are always the thing that really get you back to that foundational type of element. And I think there's always the new and shiny, which we all love, the new and shiny, and I'm not going to say I don't, but the second you move away from things that like social media or Facebook ads. Like, it's amazing when all of a sudden you bring that back into the system, and we've all done it. And it's like, oh, wow, we saw increases or things improved. That's, and yet you might be out in a completely other sphere. So I think I 100% agree with both what you guys say. And we're, even in my own operations, we're guilty of that sometimes, because R&D is fun, new and exciting is fun. And but you got to balance it between practicality and where that is. And sometimes it's just hard to do.
Absolutely. And this is a great segue into my next question here. So, looking at your journey with Gene 5 and DLR development, what strategies have you found most effective for fostering innovation within your teams?
From my perspective, I'm a big building a team around people that have skill sets that I don't have to have. In other words, I like to go find people that I put them in positions and I let them do what they do well, right? And again, I think if you kind of create that environment, obviously there has to be boundaries sometimes when it comes to Austin. On the development side, I've worked with an architect for 25 years, and Peter came up with a word called chic-economical like 25 years ago that I was like, I love this, because it's like, and why I took that with us, how can I be as creative as I can in a design, but let you know that I'm not going to bring something back to you that's going to cost 4x of what it's supposed to, right? And so, I think if everybody kind of sets the project and the expectation about what you need to have, and then you surround yourself with people that are smarter. I like surrounding myself with people who are way smarter than me, to be honest with you, and skill sets that I don't have. And so that is, I think that is the first thing. And then the second thing is you got to encourage them to develop things within their business or personal aspirations, that it can't just be about the job or the project, right? Because if you stop with personal growth, to me that's like you will never become more stagnant, you'll never become more frustrated. So for me, that's how and it's easier said than done sometimes, because you say, hey, I want to I want somebody to develop something or take a leadership class or do something that they want to do. And you're in the middle of like a busy season or a busy time from a project point of view, then you've got to go in and prioritize. But I think, to me, that's all, the part, growing as a person, growing as a professional. And I think all those things, you just see so many, incremental, like valuable lessons that you learn and experiences with that same team as they grow as people or professionally.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
absolutely. That's a great point. And I think just from our experience, Jose and I, we work very closely, but we're both remote. And occasionally he and I will hit the streets and we'll go and we'll talk to restaurants. We'll go in and we'll have lunch or we'll have dinner. And that just sort of shifts our mindset and our energy. And all of a sudden we've got some new pathways, new ideas, new thoughts about how to approach these problems that, challenges that we face on a day-to-day basis. It's just getting out of the box, getting out of your usual routine and growing and experiencing something new. Sorry, go ahead, Jose.
No, I agree with that. I think that personal development, it just the motivation. We're just not the job, and if we are able to incorporate some of each in a balanced manner, I think that it can definitely move people more and inspire new things. So on the data side, what about the importance of predictive data in restaurant management? And do you have an example of where this technology significantly impacted decision making?
Yeah, for sure. And again, it was all based on the fact that, in order to be accurate, the first thing you need is good data. And one of the big issues that, it sounds really good from a data perspective that AI, I think this is the biggest misperception. I mean, it's getting better, but that you can just feed all different kinds of data in, and that, the model will be able to instantly interpret it. And that's not the case. I mean, when you talk about video and you talk about, written, and you talk about columns and rows and, different ways that there's still that, that's like and again, Jose, I wasn't a technology guy. I thought you could just kind of accomplish all this at one time. And the technology people would be looking at me like, no, that's not even a thing. Like, that doesn't work that way. So, from a data perspective, the first thing that we needed to do is be able to train Mabel to be able to kind of interpret different types of data, not necessarily what the data was, because you weren't even at a point you could compare it. And we've done some cool projects with Amazon Amazon Predictive is the model that we started to work on and initially. But, so an example would be, and there's all types of predictive or historical type of models in a lot of programs. But the reality is, one of the things that we would see in our own restaurants, even if you compare historical data, if the holiday calendar didn't line up to the same date in the year, right? Now all of a sudden you're getting a historical thing on something, or if you had a festival. So, you had to bring in some other things like event calendars and things that you're managing your restaurants. And again, calendars that provided would be sporting events or some of those type of things. And again, as long as you had the same the same staff, like it was easy because people could sit there and say, oh, the reason it was this way is because that happened last year. And so, but what you need is, you had changeover. So for example, like with COVID, even it's like, what was the number? What is normal anymore? So it's like if you would have compared year over year. So, with the model, what it was able to do was take historical data along with traffic patterns and events that are in the area and all these type of things. And again, you needed to train that model and let it run. But, when you can get those predictive values in the 90 percentile, we had customers in the beginning that were telling us, hey, can you get this within 100%? Because we can't even do that right now. So things like that. The other example is, based on all those factors, what do you really need from a staff point of view? So Mabel, she can go in and do the schedule for the manager, which saves them a lot of time. And they're still ultimately the manager's approving the schedule, but it's a baseline for them based on, what's happened in the past, what's going to happen in the future. And then, even taking things like weather and things like that and tying that to it and giving it a holistic view, right? So I think the ability to staff more accurately or to be able to forecast sales in a way that you could have more confidence, things like ordering and the staffing levels, I think were probably two of the biggest examples of ways that we've been able to see those consistencies get better. And since the model learns, Mabel just gets better with more information that's put in, right? So that I would say those are the couple examples.
I love it. It's the perception outside. It's usually like you express is similar to the classic sentence of oh my God, all of a sudden they're $4 or $5 billion, right? It's like out of nowhere, nobody saw it coming, and it's a story. And it's like the classic entrepreneur that's been working 25 years behind on the side of the desk, right? And then finally this takes off, and for the perception out there, it's like, oh, it's out of nowhere, 5 billion. Right. So yeah, I totally understand the same with AI. It's like, oh, it's artificial intelligence. It can do anything. I remember when the first time when I was a kid, my brother was telling me about computers, and he was like, you can do anything with computers. And I'm like, what? Yeah, you can program it to anything. My imagination is going into like.
That's great. And you know what? Honestly, we run into this all the time as well, Dave. It's, post pandemic, Jose and I talk about like, the hostess or the waiter that had been working at the restaurant for 5 years, knows all of the regulars, knows what they order, knows when they're going to be in. Those people don't exist anymore because of the turnover, and who can really look, and data still doesn't tell the whole story. So something like Mabel that is learning as you go, as you plug in, the data and everything to go, you know what, last week at this time, there was a major snowstorm and this affected, deliveries and sales and all of these types of things. We don't have the regular employee who's sticking around anymore for that insight, that nuance, right?
Yeah, 100, yeah, and the loyalty, again, I love loyalty programs, but to me, the loyalty in restaurants is built by the culture and the relationships that the restaurant build. And so, if everybody it's just about technology and you can buy the technology and put it in, arguably all the places would be the same. And, I think to me, there's a definite way that can you can show that that's not the case. And even for us, I mean, we lost our turnover for however many years was not very many, right? Like, because we had people that worked for us for 20 some years, and then, retirements and management, all that kind of stuff. And to open back up with new, with new staff and in this, it's all the same. Nothing's really changed from a foundational element. It's just how that's interpreted, who's there interpreting it. And then the reality is, if you don't have that, you can lose a lot. So, you got to spend more time on training, which is where I think technology can help, right? To take away some of the mundane tasks or to ensure things don't go through the track or fall through the cracks. But then you're still working on that constant training and constant, emphasis on hospitality and the customer.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up loyalty. So it leads me to my next question. What innovative marketing techniques have you found over the years to be surprisingly effective in attracting and retaining customers in this industry?
Well, I'll tell you, social media changed it a lot. But at the end of the day, people really they're driven by something different than they normally do. I always say if it's just about food or drink, they would just eat and drink at home, right? I think it's an experience, right? And so, to me, one of the things, even, I have a couple bars and restaurants that are more sports focused, but it's amazing to me how you can, take a sporting event and then your place can turn into a party on a Tuesday over a sporting event, right? And a deal on wings and beer. And so, we've used technology in ways, but it's like the key of the matter is that whoever's that front-facing person, they need to know what the LTOs are. They need to know how those LTOs can be communicated to the customer. You need to have a strategy in place that's getting those out digitally. We would find so we've done some things with DirecTV. And, we would go out and we get packages for hockey or soccer. And, the number one reason why those weren't successful that we found out is people would come in and either the waiter or waitress didn't know, or, you walked in and the Golden Girls were on television, right, instead of the game. So, part of another thing that Mabel will do is Mabel takes in the guides for the televisions to let people know what channel the TVs need to be on based on that. And then also before they come in for their shift, sends them a reminder of what that LTO is. So if it's, dollar wings that night and I know you guys are Canadian, but we do the Red Wings piece. So it's like if it's dollar red or if it's dollar beers and wings for Red Wings nights, you better have the televisions on 783 for Bally Sports Detroit and know what that is. So just, and just things like this that, again, it's not complicated, but again, if the television isn't on, then you would sit there and say, well, gosh, I'm paying all these money for these programs or these programmings, but it doesn't have anything to do with the programming. It has to do with us not training and us not putting them on the right channel. So sometimes that simple piece, like maybe we talked about before, is the most effective way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And hey, can we do that? Again, people process technology. That is a great example of some ways that we've seen, and big, like 30% increases in sales on nights like that, right? Just for turning a television station on the right station, giving people the ability to sell it.
That makes perfect sense. That's all the time we have for this episode. Dave, now's your time to plug away. Where can restaurateurs connect with you? What's your platform of choice?
Yeah, so our website, BYOD.ai, and on LinkedIn is just BYOD. And yeah, we're easy to find. And so we love talking to operators and people trying to solve their problems and, using that technology to be able to do it.
That's fantastic. Speaking of plugs, this podcast is sponsored by Dine Pricing, real-time restaurant profitability. Dine Pricing uses artificial intelligence to improve restaurant profitability by dynamically updating menus across digital channels like Uber Eats, DoorDash, and Grubhub. That's all the time we have for this episode. Thanks again to Dave for joining us. Until next week, say goodbye, Jose.
Before I say goodbye, I just wanted our listeners to know it's BYOD for data, not for device. Because there is a social thing that is like bring your own device. Will not.
Thanks for the clarification.
Goodbye, Jose.